Hi, I'm Kristi McVie. In this episode, I'm joined by Kimberly King, author, educator, and founder of Tough Topics Mum. We talk about child sexual abuse prevention, why early body safety conversations matter, how grooming really works, and what actually helps children feel safe enough to speak up. This conversation is practical, trauma aware, and focused on prevention, not fear. Thank you for being here, and let's get into it. Thank you so much, Kimberly, for coming on to the podcast and also for sitting up late and, talking to little old me in Western Australia all the way from the
Oh,
US.
come on.
So
Well,
thank
thank you
you.
for having me. It's only 8 PM, so,
Not too
I'm
bad.
usually up worrying until 1 in the morning, so that's fine.
I know. And, I wake up so early thinking about this stuff. Like it's crazy. I think people in our sphere, in our career and stuff like that, we can relate to each other that, we do actually constantly think about this topic and these topics all different hours whilst we're with our pet family, where something might pop in our head and we're like, oh, I've got to talk about that. So yeah.
Exactly, yeah, and there's plenty of stuff to talk about now. I found myself in the, Epstein files last night till 1 in the morning just reading some things, and so, yeah, I'm glad to be back on prevention tonight.
Yeah, I know. It's very horrendous what's been released. And I think both you and I, you're the Tough Topics mom, and I'm over here talking about prevention as well. And we know that this kind of evil is around and it's
Yeah,
out there on the scale. It just breaks my heart. And I just
it's
think,
heartbreaking,
yeah,
frightening,
I've been a little
hard to
bit,
believe.
totally. And I've been a little bit disassociated because of it. I think I felt like my brain sort of had a little bit of a moment. And I saw something from a psychologist about how some of us might not be coping right now. And we're probably a little bit sort of overwhelmed and we might be disassociating. And it was kind of nice to hear that from a psychologist say, it's okay because no one's meant to be able to handle this kind of stuff in this larger scale.
Yeah, I mean, you think that because you're a body safety educator and, an expert on this topic, you probably could handle some of the things in these files. But honestly, last night I saw something that I never even thought of, and it made me just want to vomit. So I had to put the kibosh on it. I was trying to do a little research and you
Hmm.
know, thinking from a prevention stance, but it's so dark and so twisted that I just have to step
Yeah.
away. So,
Yeah, I'm
yeah.
gonna have a weekend off all socials this weekend, put my phone in a drawer and just have a nice weekend without it. So I think
Yes.
everyone, and I guess let's go from talking about that to what we want to talk about in regards to prevention, because the thing is that you and I both work in the prevention space, and there's a reason for that, right? How did you get into this space?
Yeah, so it's a bit of a long story, but I'll give you the short version of it. My son went to a sleepover at a friend's house, and I was in the middle of having a new baby. And so I left my son and his sister at our neighbors. And that night I got a weird feeling something was wrong, but I kind of talked myself out of it because I just had a baby. And I was like, I'm being paranoid, everybody's fine, it's fine. I'm just being, a new mom. And when I went home in the morning to pick him up, he kind of ran out to me and jumped in my arms and said, Mom, I had a red flag. Now, we had talked a little bit about body safety stuff, but, just if anybody touches you or your private parts, tell me. Basically, that was it. But we called that a red flag. So he told me about what happened, and it was kind of over the realm of normal curiosity to the point where it made him feel very uncomfortable. So he told me. However, that telling kind of triggered a number of memories from my childhood that I had completely forgotten about and brought up some things that happened to me in college. So I had a bit of an emotional kind of come to Jesus moment where I remembered some things and I realized I needed to get some help. I got a therapist and then in trying to make my son feel better about it, I realized that there was really no help for somebody who had this sort of unsafe, uncomfortable touch from a friend. There was no books about it.
Mm.
Nobody was teaching how to prevent it or minimize the risks or anything. And at that time, we all still thought it was the stranger in the van or, I remember as being a young mom, I was obsessed with the Elizabeth Smart case. And so I had
Mm.
completely turned into a safety freak, I think, because of my past that I never
Yeah.
really dealt with until my son had this incident. So we went about journaling, and I'm a teacher, so we just started writing and talking through it, and it got on paper, and we both kind of realized what, this was unique that we had a child's perspective talking about it, and then, mixed in with some real stories from my childhood and as a teacher, various things. So it just became a book. But I had to get some credentials behind me before publishing such books. So I did research, joined Darkness to Light, and really dug into the research to become a crisis counselor and like a hotline. I manned the hotline for a number of years and created a space for parents to communicate and ask questions via Tough Topics Mom and my website and all that. So that's the long winded story, but that's how it started. And it's still going because there is no shortage, sadly,
No.
for this topic. So,
Wow. Yeah, and do you know what your experience of like having that like flashbacks, those repressed memories coming forward when something happened, or
yeah,
even when it happens to so many parents, like they forget or their brain protects them.
right. Exactly. I sit here and hear all of these reports, whenever a survivor comes and makes charges against someone who has abused them or hurt them or whatever. Like it is incredibly brave because I'm somebody who works in this space on this topic, and I never even reported what happened to me. I remember I did tell my mom,
Mm.
and she told me, let's just forget, let's just not talk about it. If you tell anybody, you'll get a bad reputation. We're talking about this event that happened in college. So I ended up not telling anybody, which to this day, I'm still like, how do people do it? It's definitely very hard. So,
Mm. Yeah, and there's no, I mean, look, you and I both know you've been a crisis counselor and stuff like that. Every person's journey is their own, and it's their own decision whether to go forward. And sometimes
yeah,
it's not until we feel safe that we can speak up. And
exactly.
even as adults,
Oh,
we don't feel
yeah, I
safe.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. So to expect kids to tell us, I think is the question of the day. And people always say, well, your book is like about helping kids learn how to tell. And yes, it's very important to know, body parts, body boundaries, body safety rules, making sure that parents have these conversations with their kids so that they know if anything strange or uncomfortable or worrisome happens, they can tell. But, more cases than not, they don't tell because they're terrified. So, when things are happening, especially with adult to child abuse, there can be manipulation, there can be threats, there can be, these consequences that the kids think could happen, like they could ruin their family. So that's why really teaching body safety from an early age so that kids understand it and parents know how to minimize that risk, I think is so critical.
Yeah, that's what I realized in the police interviewing kids who had been abused and getting their
Yeah.
evidence and then investigating the cases. I just realized that by that stage, when it gets to that point, like so much damage is already done. And as much as we talk about child sexual abuse, and in Australia, it's a hot topic, right? And I don't know about the US, but it's really hot over here right now.
Yeah.
We talk about it, we talk about it, we talk about it, but our services are not up to scratch for anyone. Doesn't matter what age they are.
I know, and I think I was reading last week that I think it's hundreds of billions of dollars are spent on, caring for people that have been sexually abused, like the lifetime expense. Now forget about the emotional expense, but like the trajectory of their life is different. The services they need are different. The therapy they need, and to prevent it, I guess 1% is spent on prevention. And if you think about it, if we could flip that and really focus on prevention, we would have such a better chance. And I know, like, I teach in a school, it's like a child care facility with a pre-K. So just about teachers and people that have access to our children, it's really interesting. Most people here in the United States, they get some bit of sexual abuse prevention training, but there are very simple things that every like daycare and childcare and school can do to protect kids, and they don't. And so I'm just like, I just
Yeah.
don't. It's so all encompassing that it really needs to be streamlined so that everybody can access and implement these safety strategies because they're not difficult.
Yeah, no, they're not.
Yeah.
And I think from our perspective, like we know how important prevention is. Every survivor knows how important prevention is
Yeah.
because prevention And the thing about I wrote this article on LinkedIn, or like this topic on LinkedIn, about prevention isn't sexy because it doesn't, no one knows that you've actually prevented anything. Like for someone like myself and yourself, we talk about this, we educate people, and we never really know if it's effective, because if it has worked, it means no one has been harmed, and there's no,
Yeah.
like, there's nothing to like go and, no, there's no metrics for that, right? So
Yeah, there's
not
not really a well,
a s
there are some studies. There's one study by a researcher named Eleanor Craig who did a comprehensive evaluation of the body safety books at the time, and she analyzed them for these 10 criteria and then analyzed if they were effective. But that's a very small study. But what's really cool about this is, just from being an author and having this book was originally published back in like 2008.
Oh,
So I
wow.
have probably about 4,000 reviews on Amazon. And sometimes those people, they will write in a review or they will email me and say, you know what? Because we read your book, my child told me what was going on.
Yeah.
Or because we read your book, this didn't happen. So thank you.
Yeah.
And I also get a couple of, and this doesn't make sense, but I got an email from someone who said, your book is dangerous because my child was sexually abused and she waited a year to tell me. So she
Why
told
why is that
because she
dangerous?
read the book, but she was upset because, I guess, and this is part of grooming, that the person said to her, well, you didn't say no. And so, the book is called I Said No. So the child thought that because she didn't say no,
Got ya.
that was her fault. So we rewrote this book to be very clear about some of the complaints that were in the old edition.
Hmm.
So
Yeah,
we've
and this
covered
is the
that.
thing. I mean, even myself, and I'm sure you have, we constantly think about these topics, right? And we
Yeah.
constantly think about these learnings and how to articulate them to everyone so that they can understand them. But you can't really make someone understand something that isn't ready to hear it or doesn't want to understand it. Or, up until recently, in the last 10 years maybe, we didn't have the same amount of evidence and statistics and data
Right.
about it, right? And a
Right.
lot of people haven't heard of fawning, and we've heard of fight, flight, freeze, but we haven't heard of fawn. And like a lot of our
Right.
kids will fawn when they're, when they've been abused, or someone's trying to groom them, or it's a natural response to save yourself, to protect yourself.
Right, right. And it's a complicated topic to get into. And I think many people they get to this point where they're like, well, that is uncomfortable. And I'm not going to talk about that right now. Like maybe they'll do it at school, or, we can talk about it when they're 9 or 10. But the truth is that the earlier you talk about this, the safer your kids will be, the better the chances are that you make your child a very unattractive target. That's what I tell the parents that
Yes.
I work with. We want your child to just be the one that is not picked. So if you have these body safety skills, if you have these communication, meetings with your child once a week, if you're like very proactive and you're reducing the risks and you're doing all of these things, your chances of your child being chosen are lower, because predators are looking for, that child that is not going to know about grooming, is not going to know about, not keeping secrets, won't know
Yeah.
anything about their body parts. They want to get away with it. But when a kid shows up all prepared and is like, oh yeah, I know what my
Yeah.
penis is and I know you can't touch it, then can you
Yeah.
imagine that predator is going to be like, you're probably not the best person, I'm going to
Yeah.
move on. Sad, they will move on. But if we can try to really focus all of this early, the chances are so much better. And it becomes so much easier to talk about too, because when parents jump into this when their kids are 14 or
I know.
15, like the ship has sailed. They have learned what they want to learn on YouTube and Google and Chat GPT. They have the ability to access pornography. Like, it's a real mess if you don't start early.
Yeah, and also, like, teenagers, it's too late once they're a teenager, because they're gonna
Yeah.
be like, they're not gonna be engaged, they're not gonna even listen to you. What do you know?
Nope.
You didn't talk to, like, you literally have left them the door closed, and you're trying to open
Yeah.
it when they're at a place where they don't wanna listen to parents anymore.
Yeah, they don't wanna hear it from you, and it's actually, like, at that point, if you haven't spoken about it, it's icky. Like, if you just bring it up out of the blue and, they're like, "Ugh, gross, mom," whatever. With my kids, I had small little safety chats with them throughout their lives. And I have a college age son who will come to me with anything at this point. Like, we have that relationship, and I love that. And he knows if he ever needs help or has a question, he can just ask me. And his friends joke around because my hashtag or my account name on Instagram is Tough Topics Mom. So his friends will come in and go, "Oh, Tough Topics Mom," like, we have a question. Okay, you little kids, okay, but
Yeah, and
yeah,
but
I
it's
mean,
nice.
yeah, it's nice. It just makes it easier. Like, his friends will ask me questions too. I There's nothing that I'm not willing to talk about. And I think if you have that kind of mindset with your kids that they can come to you with whatever and you're going to be open and honest and support them and not judge them, then they are going to come to you when things are good and when things are bad and scary. So,
Mm. Yeah, true. And
yeah.
I was just thinking about my own child. I mean, that was most of my daughter's childhood, but there came a time when she was like, I don't want to hear it from you. And
Yeah.
like she's nearly an adult and she's, we clash because she's very opinionated. I'm like, well, I've been here and I've seen this. And so, and it's trying to navigate that. But one of the things that I'm sure you're the same, when you haven't had the best of experiences trying to talk about stuff, or there's been the energy's wrong, or you're both
Yeah.
heightened, apologizing and repairing and saying, "Hey, I didn't handle that the best way. I could have handled that
Yeah.
better. Sorry, wasn't probably
Yeah,
wasn't
because
the
we're
best
not
time to talk
perfect.
about
I
it."
mean, we always have something to learn too, and I think, that's the interesting thing about growing up today. If you have made that step to let your child have a cell phone or access to, the internet, those are completely different conversations, but it's different. It's harder to be a kid today with what they can
Yeah,
access, what they can see, and, like, just the constant pressure to not put that phone down, and how it attacks their self-esteem and creates anxiety and creates depression, and then they can get into conversations with chatbots, and they can ask AI about sex instead of you, and like, there are
yeah.
so many different ways that kids can access the wrong information.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just tough. It's
And
very tough.
not to mention they could be thinking they're talking to someone their same age, and it's an adult, and they're
Yeah.
being groomed, and they're being, like sexualized through those interactions and the games that they play, and
Yeah,
so
I
there's
actually
so
had
much
to add
information.
a new page to the I Said No book about, so we added 4 scenarios that are new. And one of them is like an online gaming situation where you're talking to a stranger, and then also like talking to somebody on the phone that looks like a 13-year-old girl, but how do you know? Like,
Yeah.
and usually 9 times out of 10, it's not a 13-year-old girl. Like, creating rules and guidance around that, because kids are so trusting and naive about people that are online. They just assume they are who they say they are.
Well, because they're they're being themselves, right? And
Yeah.
when you're online, this is the interesting thing about that online space is that when you're behind a screen, you can pretend to be anyone, right? So
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
kind of gives you this. For some kids, it probably feels very freeing to be able to pretend that
Yeah.
you're not who you are in real life, or
Right.
maybe who you feel like you are in real life. And then
Exactly.
you're behind a screen, so you're pretending, and it doesn't feel like there's any real consequences. So,
Mm,
there's no one like it, there's no police online, really. So it's kind of like it gives you that false sense of security.
exactly. And it's very hard to even report if something is going wrong online. I went to a march this year in New York City with the Heat Initiative, and we were protesting against Meta because there were like 42 cases of children ending their life, and there were like online grooming situations and sextortion. So when I heard like actual mom stories about like how the online grooming happened and the sextortion, and how their kids went to bed one night at 9 o'clock and in the morning they were not alive. It's really like all hands on deck, code red, like, we've got to
Mm.
really give our kids safer tools. It's a soapbox I get on a lot, but I think like either you wait until your children are much older, or you give them a safer phone like the Bark phone or the Trumi phone or the Gab wireless phone. I'm sure there's different phones where you are
Yeah.
as well, but I'm considering getting a Bark phone for myself because I don't want to be online anymore.
Well, I know, and I don't know if you've heard of it. It's called the brick. Have you heard of the
I
brick?
have heard of it. I was thinking about getting it.
It's really good. Like I'm tempted to write to them because I got it just before Christmas, and for the whole Christmas break, my phone was bricked. It's called brick your phone, right? And so my phone
That's
was bricked.
great.
I couldn't access like Instagram, Facebook, any of the things that I like. You got to choose which ones. And every time you pick it
Yeah.
up and go to it and realize you can't, it says get back to real life. And so I was like, okay, I'll go back and do
Okay.
something. So, and then it became a game to me, like how long can I go for? And
How can you
so,
how long can you
yeah,
go?
it was like I
Yeah.
ended up doing 26 days, I think, over the Christmas period.
Oh my gosh, that's great. I mean, I'm feeling good that I did like 2 hours off my phone today. But when I teach, I have to use, like computers and all of that. And then I use my phone to get home directions. But I spend like an hour online just doing research and social media.
Yeah.
And it's time wasted, really. But
The good thing about the brick, and I don't know why I'm promoting it right now, but the good thing about it is that you can still use all of the different parts of your phone that you need to use. You just can't use social media or whatever you choose not to use.
that sounds like a good Christmas present for all of my children.
Yeah, I highly recommend it. I should really talk about it more because
You
for
should go
me,
call them up.
I should go, hey, because for
Yeah.
me, I was like, I want to use my phone for the purposes of like reading a book or looking at, online websites or online shopping or whatever. But I don't want to be on
Sure.
Facebook. I don't want to be on Instagram. I don't want to be on TikTok, all of the things, right? So
Yeah.
that's what I did. I turned them off. I couldn't get access. And it was literally, like I said, it became a game of not being on it. So
That's amazing. I'm gonna have to get one.
so tough topics, mum. So I guess did that start up like what was the purpose of starting up that handle and like really I mean you wanted to talk about body safety, you wanted to talk about prevention, but that's a really
Yeah.
interesting handle.
Yeah. So it started off as like I said no, the name of my book, but you know, that didn't really help people find me necessarily. And so there are so many tough topics to talk about.
Yeah.
I was just thinking, and I kept finding myself saying, like, this is a tough topic, blah, blah, blah. So
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
looked
So
to
it
see if it
became who
was
you are.
available. I don't know that it actually tells people what I do. I try to do that in the account, but I
Yeah.
talk about sexual abuse prevention, parenting, a little bit of teaching tips. And then I wrote a book for parents that is basically for parents and teachers how to work together and implement body safety strategies at school and at home. So I talk a little bit about that. And then I also share some of my advocacy. And if I do speaking events
Hmm.
or what
Hmm.
have you, that's all in there too. I like it because I do my account by myself. And if somebody DMs me with a question, I answer it. I don't have 100,000 followers and I'm not the, I'm just a little
Yeah.
person answering little questions that people are often too scared to ask other people
Yeah.
because it is tough. So,
There's a lot of judgment too in the parenting space when you don't know something, right?
yeah, there really is. There's all these different types of parenting styles that mix in with body safety. I feel like I'm pretty well balanced in my approach because I came from my kids were raised in a military family. Their dad was authoritative and I was more like, middle of the road, you kind of like balanced. And so I saw how the different parenting styles affected my kids. And so now that I'm, a teacher and I'm 55 and I have these parents in my class that are younger and they have these 5-year olds, I can help them a little bit better in that space too, because so many of the things we experience are common.
Yes.
My child's not listening to my no. That's one I get all the time. And that one, I love to say, well, this is a really important thing to teach because how you model your no and how you reinforce your no helps them understand what no means so that they can keep a boundary about themselves and their body. So, like, I do a little mini class on that about the power of no
Mm.
and how to say it, how to mean it, and how not to get lawyered into a different decision, and how to choose your battles. If you mean no, I think you really do have to stick to it because it teaches a valuable lesson that carries on with your children when they give their no.
Yeah. Uh, I remember having battles because I grew up in a very authoritative, is that how you say it? Very strict family, like,
Yeah, yeah,
and so I didn't have anyone to talk to and I didn't have anything, you couldn't speak up if you wanted to. You just know
yeah.
that's it. And then, of course, that led to me as a teenager, like, sneaking off and doing things because they said no
Yeah,
anyway. Like,
yeah.
why ask when you're gonna get no?
When you're gonna get a no.
Yeah, but in saying that, when my daughter came along, I was always thinking about, like, I'm always willing to listen to her reasoning for why something should happen. But there's been times when I stood firm, like social media. She wasn't allowed social media until 13. And there was things like, she wasn't allowed a phone until a certain age, and then she wasn't allowed to do sleepovers for some
Yeah.
houses, and like there was so many things along the line. And I just remember, I felt terrible. I felt terrible inside, but there was a little voice in my head that said, if I don't model no and stick to it,
Yeah.
then how will she know when she needs to stand true? And, it's got to feel safe for everyone. And that did, and
Yeah, exactly.
so that after everyone was calm, I would explain, like, this is why. I would always
Yeah,
explain the
that's
no,
good.
but it
Yeah, it's
feels,
really
it's
important.
horrible when you're a parent and you don't know how to say no yourself.
It's so hard, and then, like, I mean, my kids did not have tantrums, thank God, but, we have a student who has some tantrums, and, that's really challenging because, you're at school and you're saying, "No, honey, you have to let go of mommy. Mommy's gotta go to work." And then this fit happens. And like, I feel so bad for this mom because she's embarrassed. She's been
Yeah,
firm and like nothing works. And I just have to say that so many people go through that. And it is pretty normal.
it is very.
There's usually a reason for a big meltdown or a tantrum. Um, so my parents in my class, they hear all the body safety things all the time, but I'm like, you know what? If if your child is avoiding a space, like I'm always trying to include some of these little body safety tips in our day, like in my newsletters, not overwhelming, but just, little things for them to think about.
Yeah, and when I think about my own daughter, sometimes, I mean, especially around 4, which is the 4, 5, which is what the age group
Yeah.
you're dealing with, some of it's just secure attachment and not wanting to be without their mum. Like, it's not that they
Yeah,
don't
and
feel safe.
I know that's okay, right? Like
Yeah.
we
My
shouldn't
daughter
feel
was
bad
like that.
about that.
My
Yeah.
daughter was like that. She would cry when I left her, and she was such a confident kid, but when my husband left her at, like, school or at, childcare or whatever, she'd be like, "See ya." But when I took her,
Bye-bye.
yeah, she'd be like, "Bye, have a good day." And then when I took her, she'd be crying and not wanting me to leave, and that's really, like, it made me feel terrible. But, you can do those mini check-ins. Is this, because she doesn't feel safe? Is this because there's something else going on? Is she not feeling well? Or is it just because you don't feel like you don't want to be without your mum today? Like, I think,
Yeah, and it can be any of those things,
yeah, yeah.
and
So,
all of those things.
and 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds, like, they've got everything going on.
They really do.
But I
They have
really
big
love that age.
feelings.
Yeah, they do. I love that age group though.
Yeah, they're great.
Do you wish, like, I guess, your experience, and sometimes I look back on my own child and I go, man, I wish I had known some of this stuff before when they were little. Like, do you ever think like that with yours?
Yeah, and it's interesting because the thing that happened with me when I think I was 5 or 6 years old, we had a babysitter who tried to do things with my sister and I. And my mother did say something to the effect of, "If anybody tries to touch you, tell me." So when that babysitter and when my mom came home, that babysitter, we never saw her again. I told my mom what
Yeah,
she
okay.
had tried to make us play games with our private parts. I told her, and she just said, "Oh, that's terrible," and then we never saw her again. So that was it, but especially when I was sent off to college completely unprepared, nobody talked, and I went to a Catholic school, so nobody talked about sex ed,
Mhm.
anything having to do with, like, your period, all of that, got nothing.
Oh,
So, I had to
that's so
figure it.
tragic, isn't it?
It is. I remember a junior year in high school, I was in the bathroom with my friend trying to like coach her on how to use a pad or a tampon. Or something. Like they didn't tell us these things,
No.
our parents that age at that age. And the Catholic school certainly didn't either. So I went to college knowing absolutely nothing. And I also went to college not really having much experience with drinking. So when
Yeah,
you put
combine the
those
2.
two things together where you don't know, your drinking limit and you don't know anything about consent or sex or any of that, really a recipe for disaster. So if I
100%.
could go back, I wish somebody would have had some kind of conversation about that with me. But they did not.
Yeah.
So, and then there's that here in the States, they call it like the red zone. The first 3 weeks of college
Gee.
for a freshman girl are like the highest chances of sexual abuse. So, like, especially at the very beginning of school when there's tons of drinking and partying and nobody really knows each other, there's a lot of abuse that happens during that time.
Oh, wow. I
Yeah.
mean, the college experience in the US is so different to Australia. Like, we don't have the same culture and like that, you all the kids get sent off to, a lot of kids today in Australia, they either go, into full-time work or a trade, or some do
Yeah.
go to university. And I'm sure there is, and I do know that there is some risks with university in Australia and stuff. But I didn't know that about the red zone. Like, I didn't know. And it makes sense, right?
Yes. And
Add alcohol.
add alcohol and drugs to the college young woman who's completely unprepared, and it's a disaster. But I very quickly moved out of my dorm and into the sorority that I had joined. And then instead of really like dealing with the trauma that happened to me, I just blocked it out. It just got pushed away. And I dove into working at the health center as a women's support specialist. So I was helping, talk to women who had accidentally gotten pregnant, or maybe they had an STD, or, some other health issue. So I was like in training as a peer counselor and working with a gynecologist and a doctor. And that is how I processed it somehow. So
Yeah.
I just kind of found myself there, and that is what I attached to.
Yeah, because that was probably because I can tell you've got like that inquisitive mind. You want to know the why and the how and all of the things. So,
I think so, and I figured if I was around people that had been through the same thing as me, maybe I would learn something or figure it out, you know? But this I went to college in 1988, so we were not talking about
yeah, right.
campus safety or prevention. That
No.
wasn't a conversation that was happening then.
And we didn't even talk about consent back then, like there was no
No.
consent conversations, and there was, and women were shamed if they were abused. It was not about, so your mum's reaction is probably very typical of a parent reaction
Yeah,
back
at
in the
that
day.
time. Yeah.
Because, it was always the girl's fault. It was always they were the ones
Yes,
who did the wrong
exactly,
thing.
and she actually said to me, "Well, how much did you drink?" And not much.
That's got
Like, I
nothing to
think
do with
1 or
it.
2 beers.
Yeah, that's
What?
got nothing to do. Well, like the fact that you had a drink isn't the reason why you're abused. It's because someone chose to abuse you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what do you do with so your books now? I Said No is now available on Amazon worldwide, and
Yep.
that is that's the updated version of your original book. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna show it to you.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah.
That's the
Yeah.
new edition. It's in hardcover and it's also on, Kindle, so
Yeah. Oh,
digital
good.
download, and they're actively looking for people to buy foreign rights and translate. So it's already been translated, I think, into no, that's my other book, Body Safety for Young Children, Empowering Caring Adults. That's this book up here.
Yeah.
That's been translated into Portuguese and working on a Spanish translation. So, yeah, they're available on Amazon and basically wherever books are sold. But now the new publisher of I Said No has really done a spectacular job of organizing everything in a more common sense way. And the illustrations are very, I would almost say like trauma informed. Like the colors are lighter, there's less mad, angry faces. And the online safety thing is included. And I actually did a whole new definition for what a safe adult is,
Yeah.
because that is one thing that bugged me about the old I Said No book. I had a page where it said, a safe adult is somebody who makes you feel safe in an emergency, blah, blah, blah. It might be somebody like a fireman, a policeman, a teacher. I gave a list of grandma. And then, I said like, and I'm sure everybody knows what I meant. But when you give a child like a list of, oh, well, my teacher's safe or the fireman's safe, they're not necessarily safe. So I had to go back. Unfortunately, not all teachers are safe. And that's just a fact. So, and nobody, it doesn't matter what job they have or who they are. We have to judge those people if they're safe adults by their behavior. So I went in and like revamped that whole definition to be just more clear. A safe adult now in the book is like somebody who will help you in an emergency, is easy to talk to about tough things, would never ask you to break a body safety rule, would never ask you to keep a secret, and is just easy to access and is an adult. Interestingly, a lot of times kids think safe adults are friends
Yes.
or their pets.
Yes.
And so it's not, if you tell your friend, that's great because you're sharing and you trust that person, but that's probably not going to go anywhere. That's really not going to get you the help that you need. And
Yeah.
obviously, like your dog, I mean, I tell my dog everything, but he can't help me if I'm
No.
in distress. I mean, he tries.
And dogs and pets, I saw that as well when I was a child abuse detective. Dogs, pets, animals are very much like when children have something that's really hard and tough to
Yeah.
tell, they will practice it on animals and they will practice it
Yeah.
on their friends because and a lot of the disclosures that I had originated from like a child telling their friend who told their parent, not
Yeah.
actually going to their own parents and sharing it with their own parents because they obviously didn't feel safe to say something or they were scared to
Yeah.
do it. So, there is some merit in that, but most children don't know how to handle that.
They don't. Yeah. So you have to kind of teach them from the beginning, like, and also like if we, the thing that I found funny with trying to write this new book and just doing more research, when you ask a child who their safe adults are, I have a thing I do in my class where I have them make a page of their green flag adults and they write three people. And then I also say, well, does anybody have a red flag adult? Anybody that they don't feel safe with? And my son, when I was doing this little exercise with him, he said, well, I don't feel safe with Uncle Shenty. And this is my brother. And I'm like, well, why not? And he said, well, Uncle Shenton, he does not stop all the way at the stop signs and he goes too fast. So he was speeding and kind of like plowing through stuff. And so that is why he became a red flag adult because it was not safe in the
I
car.
love that.
So
Yeah, but it's
it's
he
like,
didn't feel safe, so that's fair.
he didn't feel safe. So I think it's a good idea not to say, well, your safe adults are Auntie Kimmy, Uncle Shenton, and Grandma. It's better to like have that conversation and like talk about it. And who makes
Yeah,
you feel safe? What are some of the things that they do that make you feel safe instead of just like naming them because you might be wrong.
yeah.
And then also those people have to understand what it means to be a safe adult. Like if you're my safe adult and I'm 8 and I call you at 2 in the morning, you better pick up the phone. Like that's part of it. You have to know what your job is, right? So
Mm.
you've got to know how to handle a report. You've got to be able to answer the phone. You've got to be able to get there for that child and know how to react responsibly.
It's an
So
honor to be named as
it
someone in
is.
that list, like, I have actually had a few of my daughter's friends lean on me and ask me for help and support because obviously I always made them feel safe and comfortable and they knew I would do
Yes.
something, right? I took that as being an honor to be that parent or that
Yes.
adult for those people, and those kids. And even adults, when adults disclose and
Yeah.
there's a lot of people who need someone to listen to feel safe with and
Absolutely.
stuff. So it's a massive honor.
Yeah.
And I think, right, I love that you create that red and green flag list. That's such a good way to do it. Like, like who's your three green flags and is anyone would anyone be considered a red flag person? And then asking the why. Why is that person on the red flag
Yeah.
list?
Ask the why. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
And you
one
might
thing
just
I
learn
talk
something.
about in my book for grown-ups that's like a really good way to kind of get that conversation going is keeping like a conversation journal just like in the living room or wherever. And if you ever have something that you're uncomfortable about, you can write it or you can ask a question and then the parent can write back. So
Yes.
you can have a question of the day. It can be about anything. And
Yes.
it doesn't necessarily have to be about body safety, but just making like one extra way that kids can communicate with you and vice versa is just like a neat way to come at it because
Yeah,
we
that's
don't
a
talk
great
enough
idea.
anymore. I think I saw somebody doing a post about how it was so important to spend 7 minutes with your child talking every day. And I'm like, 7 minutes? Like what? That is not enough. I don't even
7
know who
minutes.
said it, so I
Is that
can't
the
call them out, but
minimum?
it was one of these big, like, parenting experts. I can't
Wow.
remember, but 7 minutes is not gonna do it, just saying, so
Well, 7 minutes isn't even like one trip to the school or anything. Like, do you not talk to each other any other time? Like, no, I mean, look, I
I
can
don't
see
know. I
where
mean,
some parents probably,
I think some of my best chats were, like, when the kids were in the car and they were
yeah,
captive audiences. That's, like, my favorite time.
yeah, same. Yeah, my daughter, even now, if she's got something really tough that she wants to talk about, she'll go, can we go for a drive? Because we're not looking
Yeah.
at each other. Generally, we're calmer.
Yeah, you can play some music.
Yeah, it's interesting. I also think that we don't realize just how our kids, like, we think people are safe and we think that they're okay. But, something as simple as like driving through a stop sign might not like make your kids feel safe. Or, I know that my child would say, "Oh, that person doesn't stop tickling when I say stop." Or,
Oh, yeah.
like things like that. And, when you take that into perspective, like when you start thinking about consent and, if adults aren't modeling the no and the stop, or
Yeah.
okay, it's your body, I won't do that, then
Right.
everyone should be on the same page, right? And they should all be modeling that.
Absolutely. 100%. I wrote a book called I Said No to Hugs last year, which is kind of like modeling that for kids and parents. So it follows the story of my niece who would not hug me. And she's the cutest little thing, but she would just run away, like do a dance, go up a tree, like all these things to avoid me. Anyway, long story short, she ended up hugging me on her own terms, and I literally fell off my chair when this happened. It's interesting because at school, most kids just come up and hug you. They don't usually ask. They're 4 or 5 and they're full of love and they just want the physical affection. And I read the book to them in the beginning of school. And now every single one of my kids at school will say, "Would you like a hug, Miss King?" They ask. And
Wow.
it's so neat to see like one little book has taught them to ask for a hug and also that other people have to ask, and
Yep.
just like a simple
So
lesson,
simple.
so easy. One book, a couple of conversations, and then they have this new boundary that is so important
And it's important because it is the foundation for all of the other, like.
for everything else.
Yeah. I wonder, like, being that you're in that kindergarten 4 and 5-year-old group teaching, and it's always occurred to me, like, like these things are foundations, right? They're the foundations of everything. They help talk about
Yeah.
sex and like online safety and grooming and all of the things. So if we have body safety from the very beginning, it makes every
Yeah.
aspect easier. And you being a teacher in that age group, I'd imagine every part of your interactions, the kids' interactions, you're always reminding them and like, "Hey, they said no. Remember what we do when people say no?
Yeah.
We stop," right? And so if
Yeah,
we all
there's
modeled that,
so
it would be
many
amazing.
teachable moments at school, and I
Those
just
kids are
I'm
so
so
lucky.
proud of these kids for like learning so much. Even before body safety is social emotional learning. So I do a lot of book reading and lessons on feelings because if you can't identify your feelings, then you're not going to be able to identify like if something feels weird in your body, if something makes you feel like you have to be able to have those skills, that emotional intelligence. So that's what basically going to preschool, reading books, singing songs, doing all these activities to help you learn about those feelings. That just folds right into body safety.
Yeah. Well, I did notice on your website that you had a list of recommended books, so I'll definitely put that in the show notes, and I'll definitely
Oh,
put
great. Yeah.
all of your books into the show notes, because the thing about this is, and I get a lot of questions from parents, and I talk about, basically you can start teaching body safety by modeling it from birth, right? But
Yeah.
at the same time, like, books help, songs help,
Absolutely.
role playing helps, all of it helps, and
Yeah.
that's how kids learn. So let's find a way to do it
Absolutely.
so that they can learn from us and we learn from them as well.
Yeah, it's so important to have that role playing piece and I also think like helping kids when they talk through something and this is in the I Said No book, like we do a think say do model. So what do you think when that's happening? What are you going to say and what are you going to do? So like encouraging them to sort of problem solve because when they do that, when they're like active in the solutions, they're much more likely to remember what the solution is if they're like in a
In the
pinch, if they're
moment.
in a situation.
Yeah.
So and then there's so many great books that are not about body safety, but are about body safety. Like there's a book called My Big Scary Elephant, which
Okay.
is by Angie Lucas. And I'll send you her. She's got a
Yeah, that'd
couple
be
of
great.
great books, but that one is about like how we all have things inside us that we're scared to share or scared to talk about, but everybody has that. And so why
Oh.
don't we talk about it? Why don't we, it's really cute. And then there's another one about what to do if they get lost in a grocery store. It's called
Oh.
Rafa and the Wrong Legs. So, like, the child, like, attaches to the wrong pair of legs and what he does to find his mom. So,
Oh.
it's a cute one too. There's so many
Yeah.
great books.
Yeah, and I think that's the one of the best things about this generation of, like, education is that everyone's got such great ideas and we're all just trying to
Yeah.
help. And I mean, I just gave away like a whole heap of my books as a gift. Like I had all of these books in my library and I gave them all away as a gift, and I've got to replenish my stock because
I know.
I like talking about books. The books are the best way to learn, like for kids to learn, especially if you interact with it and you're like the
Yeah.
storytelling portion, and then the kids, because you don't realize my daughter is a talker, like she's an auditory learner. So having a
Yeah.
conversation really helps her. But some kids, they need the visuals. Some kids, they need the role play, the kinesthetic learning.
They do.
And so that's
Or
one
they
thing
need to
for
hear it
you.
in a song. There's a YouTube channel called Body Safety Songs, and there's about 12 songs about all different things. Body boundaries, no secret, like, and they're catchy and they're cute. And for those auditory learners or for those kids that might not have the attention span for a book.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's a great one. I'll definitely be sharing that because I didn't realize that that was there.
Oh yeah, that's great, a great collection of songs.
Oh, thank you. Well, so if people want to find you, we've mentioned Tough Topics Mum, but that's what on your Instagram handle. Is that what you're on Facebook?
Yeah, I'm Tough Topics Mom on Instagram and Facebook, and I actually have a website, toughtopicsmom.com, where I house my body safety classes for kids and parents. I actually have a free class for parents on there too, so that's
Yep,
nice.
that's awesome.
And then my email is kimberlykingbooks@gmail.com, and I'm always checking my emails and
And all of your books
always
are
on the
available.
socials.
I know, but not once you get a brick. And
I know, right? I'm gonna get that brick. But
and
I
if
I do love to, come to classes and read my book, and I
yeah,
do parent and teacher trainings with Darkness to Light, and I'm certified to do that with Darkness to Light and Sapria. So that's one of
that's
the
awesome.
best parts about my job is like teaching other parents and other teachers how to reduce the risks and the tools that are available that really do work. So that's just where my passion lies is, at being an advocate for this type of education.
Yeah, it's so important. And there's never enough of us. Like I do it from my background and my history, but everyone has something to learn from each other and in ways that
Yeah.
can help differently. So it's really important, and the more of us the better, because there's so many people who need this education.
So many. And we will get there. We are making a big dent in this right now. And I hope the energy continues and we really do buckle down on prevention across the board on a global level because we need it. It's the biggest risk that children face globally.
Yeah.
Bigger than the pandemic. It's
Yeah.
the biggest risk to children's mental and physical health. So why are we not, paying more attention and doing more? We're doing all that we can, but a whole
Yeah,
lot more can be done.
exactly. Well, thank you,
So
Kimberly. I really appreciate your time, and I will share
thank
everyone
you.
with everyone all of the links, and you can get Kimberly's books on Amazon worldwide.
Yay. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Before we wrap up, I want to leave you with this. Prevention doesn't make headlines. You don't get a notification when something didn't happen, but that doesn't mean the work isn't powerful. Every calm conversation, every boundary respected, every child who knows they can speak and be believed, that is prevention. If today's conversation brought things up for you, please go gently with yourself. And if you're looking for support, I'll include helpful resources in the show notes. You can find Kimberly and her work through Tough Topics Mum, and I'll link her books and resources below. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for choosing to do the quiet work that actually keeps children safe. See you next time.